Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Police Readiness for Copilot and Policing webinar. I can see everybody's joining now. We've got pings coming through. Everybody's joining the meeting. So welcome and thank you so much for joining today's webinar. I'll let my team in the background admit everyone as they start coming through. Today, our webinar is all about readiness for Copilot in policing. So a bit of housekeeping before we start. We are recording the session. We will share the recording and the slides with you, so you'll get a copy of those afterwards. I won't lie, there was quite a lot to cover in a short period of time. There's lots of readiness activities and things to be aware of. Lots of knowledge sharing. So if you don't follow along, if we cover a lot of things, we will share all of the content with you, so don't worry. If you do have any questions throughout the webinar, we have the Q&A panel, which is at the top of your Teams window. And we also have the chat function open as well. So if you want to ask questions there or start a conversation in the chat box, please feel free to. One of the nice things about bringing everybody together for these types of webinars is that we can learn off each other as people in different forces. Feel free to share anything in the chat if you're going through a kind of Copilot rollout yourselves. So let's kick off. So just a quick introduction. So my name is Kat. I'll be running through today's webinar. I am the head of AI at CPS. So I manage a team of consultants and architects, and we deliver AI solutions for policing throughout the UK, particularly with Microsoft 365 Copilot, Copilot Studio, and some other AI tools as well. So hopefully in a good place to be able to talk you through some things to be aware of as you're going through your own AI journey. I also just wanted to say my LinkedIn is there if you want to scan that QR code. I always like to connect with people on LinkedIn, and I do try to share new updates on LinkedIn as well. So feel free to follow along, always looking to expand my network. So please feel free to scan or find me on LinkedIn. So I won't spend too long on who are we, because that's not why we're here. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of things about CPS, and we know working in policing that it's an unfortunate acronym that we have as a Microsoft partner. Is Corporate Project Solutions. So that's the acronym CPS. It's funny. I went into working with some social workers, and they said, "Why is Child Protection Services here?" And I was like, "No, it's a different CPS." So we get confused a lot. But we are Corporate Project Solutions. We're a Microsoft partner, and we deliver solutions to organisations, particularly in policing and central government across the UK. Our expertise, so I manage AI, but we do have expertise across the full Microsoft stack. So when it comes to readiness for AI, we have security teams, we have modern work management teams, we have BizApps teams. So it's quite nice that we're not just telling you about the stuff that you need to do, we can help you with that as well. Two things I wanted to point out on this slide. Number one is you'll see that we are the #1 fast track partner in the UK for Copilot. What that means is out of about 40 UK partners, we are #1 for Copilot growth, and that's growth for usage month on month. So not only are we in a good place to help you get ready for Copilot, but we have the skills to be able to help you increase your usage and value of the licenses that you've invested in. And that is proven by the fact that we're the #1 partner in the UK. And I want to shout that out because my team have worked very, very hard over the last year to drive adoption and make that happen. The other thing I wanted to point out is the passionate technologists. So me and my team, we absolutely love this stuff. We love the technology. We're really excited to just share as much knowledge as we can. And it's such an exciting area to be in because of the new advancements in the technology and the way that it's moving. So it's a really exciting journey, whether you're on it or you're ready to start it. If you're implementing Copilot, it's really, really exciting. And I just wanted to highlight our experience in policing as well. So we do work with industries across the board. What we find as well, when we're rolling out Copilot, we have lots of experience, with councils and central government, and a lot of those use cases are repeatable within policing. We're working with quite a few forces right now on their Copilot journey, so rolling out Copilot, helping with their readiness piece. Even looking at AI agents and Copilot agents, And one of the things that we like to do is try to share use cases across all the forces. You don't want to have to do, the same activity 43 different times across 43 police forces. Any experience that we have, we will try and share that as much as possible with the right permission, of course, but we want to make sure that, any use cases that we capture, any benefits, we can then share that for whichever force we work with next. So that's where our kind of USP comes along. We've got a pack of use cases. We've got a place to start already. We've done a lot of the groundwork, so should be in a good place to help. And it shows that hopefully we're in a good place to talk to you about AI and readiness for policing today. Okay, so 3 key takeaways. What are we actually going to talk about now that we've got the boring bit out of the way? The 3 key takeaways for today's webinar is it's all about readiness for Copilot. So what we are wanting to cover today are things like governance and security. So there will be questions, there always is. We've run an event in London recently, which was with about 30 different police forces. The one thing that kept coming up was the concern around data governance. Where does your data sit? What does Copilot do with it? Is it used to train the AI model? What's that all about? So I'm going to just hopefully demystify that and show you some of the tools that Microsoft provide you to manage that a bit better and when we'd recommend using them. What we also want to cover is change management. When you're getting ready for Copilot, it's not just about, responsible AI, governance data, that's very important. But without change management, you could roll out AI and no one uses it and no one gets benefit and that's it. So we have some guidance of things to start planning or at least thinking about if you are moving down the Copilot route. And some things that we have found work very well when it comes to getting people to use AI, especially if you're brand new to it. Finally, I want to show you some strategies for implementation. This is going to primarily be focused on where should you put licenses? Now, we're not telling you where because you can put licenses where you want. If you're buying Copilot licenses, we have worked with a few forces now where actually we have seen some benefits in areas more than others in terms of time saving and what they're using it for. And that may change as we start to get more forces involved and start rolling it out to more people. But we have some guidance in terms of here's where we've seen the biggest wins immediately within 3 months, and hopefully that will guide you in terms of where you should start maybe planning to roll this out. So we're going to give you some strategies for implementing as well. So there is a lot to cover, and I saw, Terry, your message there. You'd love to see the use case register. Absolutely, we're happy to share that with you. We have a little piece at the end in terms of next actions, where we can kind of talk through some of the resources that we can provide you, things like the use case pack that we've provided, that we've created with some other stuff as well. So we'll cover that at the end. All right, so let me get started then. What I wanted to do before I dive into governance and security straight away, I just wanted to tell you a little bit in terms of the why. Why Copilot? Why is it important to policing? I know you're going to know this and some of this already, but I did want to just highlight kind of the reasons why we're seeing more forces investing in AI and kind of the future of it. And before that, though, Mark very wonderfully has reminded me, we do have a poll that we wanted to run just to see where everyone is at in terms of your Copilot journey. So quick poll, it should pop up on your screen now. And you should have a few options in there. If you can just pick maybe one that's relevant to you and your force and where you are. Where are you today in terms of readiness for Copilot? How are you just exploring? Have you started? Are you looking at some of the technical prep? Have you done an assessment? Are you doing it? Are you piloting it? So what I'm going to do is just have a quick look now at some of those responses. You should see them in the chat as well. So I see there's quite a few people who are already piloting and using Copilot. Wonderful. Some people are looking at the potential, starting to explore it. Lots to learn. Yes, we're all on that journey of learning within Copilot, within policing. But there are quite a few of you who actually have started piloting it. So for those who have started doing it, If there's anything that you want to share in terms of insights or anything that I'll talk about today that you want to add to, please post it in the chat, because again, we're all trying to learn off each other. So anything that comes up that you think, oh, this was helpful for us, or this worked well when we were trying it out, feel free to post that in the chat and help the others who are maybe just starting that journey. But wonderful. Thank you. Perfect. That gives me an idea of where everyone's at. So let's talk a little bit about the why, and I'll wanted to highlight as well some of the ROI that we have found when we're working with forces. So we'll give you an example of we've conducted a pilot. Here's the results from a 3-month pilot with a certain number of users, and here's what we found. But I just wanted to really start with the bigger picture. Why AI? Why now? These things you'll already know, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there's key themes that we're finding when we're working with police forces. So obviously we've got across England and Wales, there's a real squeeze, as we all know. Demand is going up, expectations are rising, resources aren't keeping pace. And when we interview officers and staff members, we always get the comment of they have to do more with less. They are their time is tied up in things like documentation and reporting and chasing information, and they're not spending their time in the best things that they could. So it's they want to spend less time on manual tasks. They want to focus more on decision making and community work and making a real impact. And that's where AI starts to come in for those staff members. And we've got some quotes on the next slide where you can actually see how that's impacted some of the people that are using it on the front line, people who are using it and seeing benefit. When it comes to public expectation, of course, sometimes there are delays in investigations, which are a big issue, and sometimes that just comes down to workflow inefficiencies. Case files are taking too long to pull together. There's too much duplication. Staff are under pressure, just trying to stay on top of it all. If AI can kind of speed things up and reduce rework, make decisions, decision making quicker and easier, that's a really big win, not just for productivity, but also for service quality as well. And then finally, growing risk of shadow AI. So when we've been speaking to some forces, and we're at an event, as mentioned, a few weeks ago, or about a month ago now, and there was people in that event who said, I have spoken to officers who have said they are using ChatGPT. They have said it. They maybe shouldn't have said it. But we know staff are already exploring those tools, and that isn't just policing, that is across industry. So you'll be happy to know it's not just you, it's everyone. And that's just because it's staff are trying their best, and they're just trying to find a tool that's going to make their life easier. ChatGPT is available and it's free, but there is a big risk there because with ChatGPT, if you put any information into it, it is used to train the OpenAI service. Which means there is a risk of data loss and sensitive information, and it's not malicious. Staff are not doing that on purpose. They just don't know, because they don't need to know really necessarily how an LLM works. But there is a risk of that, and we're starting to see that come through. If you don't give them an AI tool that they can use, they will find shadow AI that they can use, which we're finding consistently across the board. So there's not all doom and gloom. We do have an opportunity here within policing to address some of these key issues that we're finding. And at CPS, we have worked with a few forces now where we have run a Copilot pilot, and at the end of it created a bit of a business case around, okay, what does AI give to staff and officers? How much time does it save them? What does that mean for our force? So I wanted to show you a little example of that business case. So I've not said the name of the force just in case they didn't want us to share, but this is an example of a force in England where we ran a 3-month pilot, and we did it for about 150 users across different areas. Different licenses were given to frontline officers. They were given to admin staff, HR, change managers. There was a really good mix in terms of where the licenses were. And the return on investment here isn't just a number, it's real world time and resources. The productivity gains that we found are the equivalent of hiring 4 additional full-time officers, and that's without recruitment, training, salary costs. That could be 2,000 extra patrol hours. That helps with frontline visibility and presence. And that's just in the fact that people are saving time on manual tasks, repetitive tasks, and finding information. And that's what AI provides. Alternatively, that is £165,000 in productivity savings. So you can tell me how many police cars that is in terms of, being able to unlock major investment through working smarter without having to try and, get more money. It's unlocking it through giving people the ability to do more with less. And when we talk to officers about the change, it's really, really impactful. So they talk about, you'll see some quotes there on the right-hand side. They talk about Copilot helping them manage incidents faster, cutting time on scrutiny reports, reducing the cognitive load in intelligence meetings because Copilot's there to take notes for them. One of the officers said, "I pay for it myself," which tells you really how transformative it is on a personal and operational level. So with policing, the budgets are stretched, frontline demands are increasing, really this type of digital innovation, it delivers really great measurable value, and it's not compromising on safety or service delivery. So this is what modern policing can really look like. It's smarter, it's faster, it's enabling people to focus on the work that matters most. And this is not just across policing. I've got some snippets in here of the NHS England and the UK Gov announcements where they recently ran pilots where NHS England, they did a pilot saying that people were reclaiming over 3 hours a week, which means that they can actually provide better care, more impactful work. And you'll see the UK government trial there, Copilot saving an average of 26 minutes a day on average across their staff and their pilots. So it's not just unlocking this in policing, we're seeing this across every industry and all the way through into UK government trials as well. So it's a really great to see. I can see some comments in here. I can see some questions. So the just on the FTE saving, is that a saving of 4 FTE based on the size of those participating in the pilot for the whole organisation? That was just the pilot. So if we were to scale that across more users, so that was the equivalent time saving turned into FTE. So that was just for that pilot. So if you can imagine, we have a piece in our business case where we say, well, if we were going to scale this to 1,000 people, here's what the FTE, and it's a pretty big number. Of course, we do an adoption bias as well. So we say not everyone's going to use it and save this much time. So we'll put an adoption bias on top of that as well. But that's what it's across, which is massive. So I know there's a comment on, and there's some conversations going in the chat, which is great. Highly encourage that. I do have a little bit on the non-licensed version, so I'll come on to that a bit later on as well. Wonderful. So let's take a quick look at governance, security, and responsible AI. So some of the key things to be aware of. So first of all, I wanted to, for those who are starting your Copilot journey, you're in a pilot, I'm hoping you already know about this. For those who aren't, I want to demystify Copilot a little bit for you in terms of how it works, what it does with data, and any kind of concerns you might have if you just don't know about it, which of course you think AI, you know, oh my goodness, what does it do? How does it talk to your information? What control do we have over it? Hopefully we can demystify some of that for you today. So this is a Microsoft 365 Copilot architecture diagram. It looks horrible and scary, but I'll talk you through it, and it just helps understand how Copilot actually works. So this is for the full Microsoft 365 Copilot license. So this does not apply to the free chat version or any personal versions. This is just the full license version. So what you'll see here is we have a few processes for Copilot. So for example, we're going to start at the beginning up top here. And this is the first step, which is the user prompt. For example, I'm a user and I'm in HR and I open up Copilot in Word or Copilot Chat, the licensed version, and I ask it to help me write a job description. I want you to help me write a job description for a HR admin assistant, and I want you to include these things, draft this for me, and then maybe I can tell it to look at a previous job description and use that as a reference. So I put in a prompt into Copilot. What it does is a few steps. It will go through a few processes. The first step you'll see in here after the user prompts, it does grounding, which is pre-processing. What that means is it goes in and looks at your Microsoft graph. Now, your Microsoft graph, hopefully you're aware of what that is. If you're not, essentially it's not a storage location for all your data. It's where all of your information and relationships connect to each other. So, for example, if somebody sends an email about a job description that you're copied into, you have to be able to have permission to see it, and they talk about HR admin assistant, it will go in and it will identify, okay, someone's already emailed about a job description, and then this person has also written another job description, and they've talked about this with this person, and it's just connecting all of the dots and all of the context of your data within Microsoft 365. So all your emails, Teams messages, meetings, Outlook emails, I've already mentioned that, calendar invites, all of that stuff, it's understanding the context between that. So it's going in and it's looking at it to say, okay, where's all this information that I can use to help draft this job description? Now, a very important point to note here is it can only see things you're allowed to see. It inherits all of your M365 permissions. So if I'm not in HR and I do not have access to the HR SharePoint site with all the salary information and all the sensitive data, I can write a job description, but it's not going to use any of that information to help form that response. It's just not going to look at it. If I'm not in an email, if I've not been copied into an email, if I can't access it, Copilot's not able to access it. So it inherits your current permissions that you have in Microsoft 365. So it goes in, it has a look, and it says, okay, great, I've found the context of the information. That's why Copilot's quite good, because it's not a search engine, it's more powerful than that. It's looking at the context, not just keywords. So it's not just looking for HR admin, it's looking at the relationships and the context behind it, which makes it more powerful. It does a few other processes. What it will do is it will go through into the large language model. It will turn that response into natural language. So basically for turning it from AI speak into human speak, so I can actually understand the response. But it also does a couple of checks back and forth. It will check compliance and purview. And I'll cover this in a second, but it will make sure, okay, any of the content that I'm creating, does this have sensitivity labels on it? Is it a confidential file that I'm using, and does this person have access to it? Can I use that? Because Copilot will also inherit any labels that you put in place as well. So if you use something that is confidential and labeled as confidential, but I have permission to see it, any content that I create will automatically be labeled confidential. So it will inherit the sensitivity label. So it's checking for that. That's what it's checking for. Finally, it pulls that information back through to the user and it provides me with my HR admin assistant job description. And what you'll notice is I've said quite a few different steps there. It does this in a couple of seconds. So I ask it in Word or in Copilot Chat, and it does all of this. It goes in, it checks, it understands, it checks for compliance, it does another check, and then it puts it into natural language, then it comes back to me. And then I get that response. So it's doing a lot in a couple of seconds. A couple of things to note with this process is every time I ask Copilot to do something, it does this process again. So if I close out Copilot and I wait 2 minutes and I come back on and I say, write me a HR admin assistant job description, it will do this entire process again. It doesn't have memory. And so when I ask it, it will go in and it will look for the context and it will do the back and forth and it will come back with a response. What that means is you might have 2 different job descriptions. You'll have the first one and the second one. They might be slightly different because Copilot's running through this process again. And in that couple of minutes, something might have changed in terms of your graph. So whenever we say talk to end users about this, we don't show them this. Do not show end users this, it'll terrify them. The main thing to tell them is, there's no right or wrong answer. Which one should I use? Just use the one that you prefer. the one that's the best, the one that you want to use, the one that you like better. But that's something that is good to communicate to them so they understand the differences. And I just saw the model question come through. So one tip actually is, so it uses the latest ChatGPT model. The Copilot chat will always have the latest model version. So that's always in Copilot chat, the licensed version. So you open up the full kind of Copilot app. That will always have newer features coming to it as well. So that's always my go-to. I always use Copilot chat unless I specifically need a PowerPoint or I need a document. Then I'll use the Office apps, but I will stick to that because I know that's got all the new features. It's always on the latest version, and it tends to work a bit better. But we have some other webinars on adoption and training, and I'll cover a lot of that then. The other things I wanted to point out here is that you'll notice that we have a service boundary. So this service boundary means that all of this, that process, everything it does, it goes and looks at your graph, all of that stuff is within the context of your tenancy. It does not train the OpenAI service. That is very, very important. Whereas ChatGPT, the free kind of online version, it does. That's the big difference. Copilot does not. Everything that's done is within the context of your tenancy. It doesn't move data. It doesn't, it's not a storage location. It's going in and looking at your graph and it's providing the responses out back to you. It is not taking that out or doing anything with it. And it's not training anything as well. And that's very, very important. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of context in terms of how it works and that boundary that you have over that. And that's Microsoft's commitment. As you can imagine, the types of organizations that we work with extremely sensitive data and sensitive information. And so this is important. I don't think we would have Copilot if this wasn't, the commitment from Microsoft wasn't there. So it's not used to train any OpenAI service. Now, I feel like I spent a little bit longer than I planned to on that. So let's move swiftly on. So in terms of the security controls that you have over it, so here's some recommendations from Microsoft. I won't go into too much detail. We can support you with this. So we usually do a readiness piece of work with our customers who want to explore doing an assessment, seeing where they're at in terms of their data, security and compliance, and we make a plan for a bare minimum of what we'd recommend. This is our Microsoft recommendation, which is if you're starting with Copilot, do an assessment, which there are free assessments online that Microsoft provide, which are quite good. You answer a bunch of questions. Have you got sensitivity labels enabled? What about data loss prevention? Have you got insider risk management? What have you enabled? What have you not enabled? Where's your data? Where does it live? Is it on-prem or is it all in SharePoint? You'll answer a bunch of questions. It'll give you an output, which is some recommendations before and during your Copilot rollout. So they're really handy. We'll share some links in our follow-up, but we would also support with that assessment. Once we have that assessment, you'll get some recommendations, but whenever we work with forces or central gov or local gov customers, I wouldn't recommend you wait until you've, rolled out every single thing in Microsoft Purview as an example, because you'll never get AI because you'll be waiting for years. So what you'll see here is actually there are some bare minimum things we'd recommend you do, which we'll come on to in a second. But we would recommend that we start with a pilot, at least with Copilot. Because it inherits all of your current permissions, there's not really any new risk that's created. And it's only as good as your data. So if the only thing I would say is if your SharePoint, all your SharePoint sites are all public and open, I would just lock some of those down, or I'd take them out of Copilot scope, and I'll talk about that in a second. But those are some of the bare minimum things we'd recommend. What you'll see here is you need to start optimizing as you roll out Copilot. So you'll see here there's some core recommendations here. There will be things like baseline sensitivity labels that you have in your Microsoft 365 licensing. So that's, confidential, sensitive, all those kind of labels that you can create for very, very sensitive information. There's also data loss prevention policies that, of course, Copilot adheres to, just to make sure that it's not malicious intent, but if people are accidentally sharing too much information, you've got some control with your data loss prevention policies. So there are some baseline Microsoft Purview features that's worth looking at. Retention is probably quite important as well. You don't want outdated data in there, because Copilot, if you don't give it some parameters, it will look at everything you've got access to, and it might show you some outdated or old information that's not relevant. But again, it's only as good as your data. So if you've got some retention policies on, you're getting rid of stuff as you need to, that's always best practice. There are some auditing capabilities that you have. So you get this as part of your standard M365 E3 licensing. You get auditing capabilities. You can audit Copilot. So you can audit the activities, the prompts, the kind of responses and all of that good stuff. So the auditing is not for analytics. It's more for if you're investigating a serious issue that someone's done with Copilot, or there's some disciplinary thing going on. That's probably why you'd use auditing. I'll talk about analytics in a second. What you'll then see is best in class. If you're on a E5 license, of course, there's going to be things like insider risk management, which is the prevention of malicious intent. So if somebody's maliciously, they've been let go of the organization, and they're downloading lots and lots of things to a USB, or they're printing loads of stuff. Insider risk management will kind of flag those things, and those are just recommendations anyway, not just with AI. So you should probably, if you've got E5, have a look at some of those additional features you get. Of course, automatic labeling, and you have some better retention policies with your E5 as well. So with your kind of E3 licenses, you can apply retention to SharePoint, to Exchange. So you can say, we're going to keep everything in Exchange for 7 years and then delete it. As an example, we're going to keep everything in SharePoint for 5 years, and then we're going to put a process in place, whatever it may be. With your E5 license, you can actually go a little bit deeper, and you can say, okay, I want to keep all of our medical information for this long and then delete it. I want to keep all our financial information. So it will look at the actual content itself and delete it, not just the overarching tool. So E5 does have its benefits there, which obviously just makes Copilot a bit better because it's looking at very relevant data and not outdated information. So the key message here is there are some basic things that we would recommend you get in place. We can support with that. We'll share the assessment. When you're starting to deploy Copilot, we're doing this at the same time. So we absolutely wouldn't recommend you waiting until you've got all your labels sorted, because it's sometimes can be a big project to get that in place, and then you'll just never see the benefits, and then you've got a bigger risk of shadow AI. So there's all that stuff as well. We do have some customers who have E5, and they have used like Azure Sentinel to monitor ChatGPT usage. So they can monitor through the browser, they can see who's using ChatGPT versus Copilot. There's some things you can do there. You can also block it as well from being used. Some organizations have decided we're not going to allow ChatGPT at all on our laptops, and we can manage those. So you've got a few options there, but the message is, wouldn't wait until it's all done before you start, because you'll just be left behind. So I did want to talk about a new change that's come up. And sorry if this is a little boring. It's important though. So it's SharePoint Advanced Management, or SAM for short, which is great because we've got lots of SAMs at CPS, so it's very confusing. But this is something that you get as part of your Microsoft 365 Copilot license. This is a new change. Previously, you had to pay for it separately. And again, we'll share some resources and some links, but it's definitely worth looking at because you get it anyway and you used to have to pay for it, which is great. So if you've got M365 Copilot, you can use this. So SharePoint Advanced Management, you will find it in your admin center. It's additional controls over like sites and oversharing and those types of things. So I'll go through it just quickly, just so you're aware of kind of the types of things that it can do. So the first thing is managing your content sprawl. As we know, when you're working with, creating sites, creating teams and channels, there is risk of sprawl. And, if there's no governance around who can create a team or who can create a site, when should someone create a site, then you might have like 10,000 teams and SharePoint sites. Some of them are not used, some of them are outdated, and sometimes it's difficult to know what's still relevant or if it's even a secure site. So when I was saying earlier, one of the recommendations is to look at absolutely your public sites in SharePoint. You need to check those, because if there's a public site that is got sensitive information in it, hopefully you don't have that situation. But if there is, there is a risk then of Copilot being able to go in and look at that, which is there is a risk of someone searching, for it anyway in Microsoft Search. So you should lock that down anyway. But there's a tool in SharePoint Advanced Management that lets you detect any inactive sites, any orphan sites. So that's sites if they don't have like a admin or a manager, owner, sorry. It allows you to apply archiving policies. So that means you can just stop with like redundant, outdated information, duplication. You can apply archiving, but still keep the information, but it's archived in an archived state. And that means that Copilot's going to bring you useful results. So that's quite handy. So I definitely recommend looking into the advanced management, even just for that. But it also helps with oversharing. Now, this is something else that is a little bit of a risk when it comes to Copilot, is the oversharing. So that is where sensitive content, and we're worried about sensitive content here, that's the priority, it's exposed because there's broken inheritance, or someone has shared a link to a file that's stored in a secure SharePoint site. They've shared a link to a file. They've changed the permission so anybody in the force can access it, and then they've put that link into a public team or something like that. So there's risk of somebody taking something out of SharePoint via a link, changing the permission, so breaking the inheritance, and then putting that into somewhere public. It doesn't happen very often, but there is a risk there, and that's not Copilot. That's just not teaching our people how to use links and how to share through SharePoint. So with advanced management, you can basically get tools to detect any broken permission links. So you can see all of the sharing links, you can see if any have been broken, and you can just close them all off as an example, which will help prevent some of that oversharing. But again, I do that with the most sensitive sites that you have, checking to make sure there's no broken links in there, and that will prevent the oversharing. There's also controlling Copilot's access to content. So if you think about how quickly Copilot responds to a user, if you've used it before, you ask a question, 2 seconds, it provides you with a response. If permissions aren't clean and current, it might surface things that they're not meant to see. So with SharePoint Advanced Management, you can look at real-time permission changes. So you can see, all of your content access at scale. So you can get a view of, here's all of our sites, here's all the control and access that they have. We need to address these things. So you get that overall view across your entire SharePoint estate. And then lastly, quite handy is the content lifecycle. I mentioned the inactive data, which causes Copilot to just not be very relevant because the information it's providing just isn't great. And I know some of your content in policing, it does have to be retained for many, many years. But there are some types that can be disposed of after a specific period. So retention policies here, but SharePoint Advanced Management allows you to monitor that. So you can see activity levels, you can enforce lifecycle policies that then link into your retention policies. So that's not a retention thing itself, it's a tool to help you view it and then apply your retention to the relevant site. So if you're kind of lost and you think, oh, do you know what, we've got so many SharePoint sites, I don't even know where to begin, this will give you an overall view of what actions you need to take immediately. So highly, highly recommend you look at SharePoint Advanced Management. SAM is the acronym, because you get it as part of your licensing, which you had to pay for previously, and it can be very, very helpful, even if you're just using it as a way to say, we have done a review of our estate. The SharePoint sites are the biggest risk because that's where your files are, and that's where the permissions come from. So that's why we're focusing a bit on SharePoint. If your data is not in SharePoint, if it's elsewhere, then Copilot is only able to look at M365 stuff in your graph. So it's not going to be able to look at it unless you connect it, which is a whole other story. We don't have time for that today because I'm conscious of the time, 20 minutes. So a few other bits on governance, and then I'll move on to some of the change management stuff. And sorry if I am going fast, there is a lot to cover. We will share all of these resources with you. We just want to try and share as much knowledge as we can. So one of the tools we wanted to highlight is restricted SharePoint search. Say that fast 5 times. This is the one that was on the previous slide, which is a recommendation of, make sure you do this if you're going to pilot Copilot. Restricted SharePoint search needs a better name, but it is a temporary tool. So this is a tool that Microsoft recommend you use if you're running a pilot, but if you're rolling this out, you need to look at advanced management, you need to look at retention and some of those bigger pieces. But this is a quick way to essentially stop Copilot from looking at certain things. You can do this anyway. So if you're rolling this out, you can do this, for good. But you can say, okay, I want Copilot to be able to look at all of these sites apart from these three. These three sites have sensitive information. We just don't want to risk it. Even though it's locked down, we just don't want to risk it. We're going to take that out of the scope. So you can kind of pick and choose specific ones. If you're choosing a site which is like a hub level site, it will include all of the sites related to that as well. So if you said, I just want to take out our intranet as an example, you could put that top level site and it will include everything under the intranet. And you can do that for a maximum of 10 sites. But remember, it does include all of the associated sites underneath. So that's a tool that's there if you wanted to, just for your own sanity, like, let's just take this out while we pilot Copilot. In a pilot, what we found, because it is a pilot and the way that we communicate to users is it is a pilot, we're testing this out, we need your feedback, and we need you to tell us if you see something you don't think you're supposed to see. So we use the pilot as a way to say, okay, in reality, when people are using it day to day, here's what we need to adjust if we're going to roll this out fully. So sometimes we say, don't maybe turn this on, because then we can adjust for a bigger rollout. But it is there if you want to. And this is what it looks like. Your organization's admin has removed certain sites from Copilot, so they can still access the site if they've got permission to access it in SharePoint. It just can't use Copilot on it. Okay, so another part of the governance and security is responsible AI. So it is important that you have some of this in place before you start rolling out Copilot. Responsible AI, Microsoft uses the standard global, practice of or principles of responsible AI. The accountability, transparency, fairness, reliability. Don't ask me to name them all. That's a good test for me, but it has the standards for responsible AI. And the good news is Microsoft already have policies, they already have responsible AI documentation, they already have lots and lots of tools and guidance for using Copilot and adhering to responsible AI. So one thing that we'd recommend is making sure that you have at minimum a policy in place for acceptable use or responsible use of AI for your users. Even if you've downloaded the Microsoft one, just download it and have it. And that's what we usually do in our first communication to users. In our very first communication, you're going to be part of a Copilot pilot. Here's the things that we need you to do as part of it. But the benefit is you get access to AI. It's going to save you a little time and all this great stuff. But we need you to turn up to this training. We need you to feedback these things. And we need you to read and accept this responsible AI policy. Because when there'll be things that come up that will need some guidance. So for example, we work a lot with like social workers in councils. And one of the things that kept coming up was with social workers, if they are on site with a vulnerable adult and they want to record the meeting, the on-site meeting with them, so they can then use Copilot for their meeting minutes, what happens around consent? Who can give consent? I need a bit of guidance on what meetings I can use it for and what meetings I cannot. There's also safeguarding in Copilot itself, which means there are some conversations that Copilot's not going to be able to pick up because of the nature of the conversation, if it's about anything that hits their safeguarding policy. So like abuse and those kind of detailed discussions that social workers absolutely do have. And I know in policing, we've had some of those challenges as well. So there are some situations where it's not appropriate to use Copilot here, but in these ones it is. So people are going to need some guidance. And people are going to need to know that they are responsible for the work that they do with AI. If you create something with AI, you cannot blame Copilot if it's wrong. You have to check your work. Your name is on the document, your name's on the email. So all of that messaging, that's important to get in place. Without it, people do freak out a little bit and they're kind of like, well, what do I do? Do I trust it? No, you check it. You always check. Particularly in policing, we're working with a few forces right now where we're trialing with back office staff. But even then, we need to be aware of, so if an officer was going to use something in court, and they've used Copilot to help pull some of the stuff together. Like how do we manage that and navigate that? So there's all these things, but the readiness piece is get a policy in place to begin with. You'll see here I've got some other things that we recommend you do, which are things like an AI board. We've worked with customers creating an ethics board for AI, and they meet on a monthly basis, and they will address those issues that come up, like the social worker one that I told you about. We don't understand what those are until we go through the pilot process. So having that board to do that meeting to say, right, we are, here's how we're going to address this particular situation and provide guidance to your users. So that's something that has worked quite well. That board, it could be, we recommend having like a mixture of different heads of departments in there and representation from the force. Sometimes it is also part of an existing governance board that you already have. So there's different ways you can do it, but at minimum, you need some of that guidance. There are tools, again, that we'll share with you to help you with that if you haven't done it. Whenever, we do training to end users, we talk about responsible AI. So that's like the last thing that we finish with. Check your work, you're responsible, read the policy, make sure that you understand how to use AI responsibly and ethically. So that's just something to be aware of. Again, we can support with that if you want some guidance, if you want some help, what other forces have done, what other customers have done when it comes to making sure this is in place. But it's an important one to point out. So we spend days and days of workshops going through governance and security. So I can't fit a lot in 20 minutes, but it's a high level. Hopefully there's some key things to think about there. Again, if you want a deep dive, let us know and we can support with that. So I just seen a quick question from Zach in terms of the guidance on content structure and quality of a SharePoint library to make sure the retrieval. So we'll come back to this one because we have found there's some guidance from Microsoft, but we have found depending on what you're doing, so if it's an agent that you're creating, so if you're creating a Copilot agent that's interrogating a SharePoint site, there are some recommendations we would make. For example, don't have things 20 folders deep, like get rid of your big folder structure because Copilot struggles to find things that are that are too low on a level. Naming conventions, making sure things are labeled correctly because then it helps Copilot find it. With Microsoft 365 Copilot, just the general going into the graph, there's not massive changes there. It's mainly just making sure that you've got rid of old content, that it's not outdated. But if you're doing agents for a very specific purpose, that's when we'd say you need a bit better naming convention structure. We go through that there. So there's different kind of scenarios for that. So maybe it's one we pick up offline, Zach. I hope that gives you a little bit there. So in terms of change management, it's all well having your responsible AI policy. You've set up your governance. You've got an AI board. You've done your restricted SharePoint search. You've got rid of some. You've looked at all your sites. If you put out Copilot and you don't do anything else, it will fail, and you will not get the return on investment that you probably have to prove as part of a pilot, which we all do. And so there are some things to think about with change management. Now, our next webinar is going to go into use cases for Copilot and policing. There's going to be lots of demos, and we also have a webinar on adoption where we're going to go through how to drive people using Copilot. They're new to AI. What techniques, what tips, what exercises do we get people to do? How does it work? So we're going to go into that in a deep dive. So make sure you register if you haven't already. But one thing when it comes to change management that we found is quite useful is using the free Copilot chat. Now, this is quite handy if you haven't used if you're not doing a pilot. If you use the free Copilot chat, there's no investment necessarily in terms of licensing. As long as people log in with their police their force email address and password, you've got enterprise protection. So you've got the little green tick, which again is Microsoft service boundary commitment. Any files that are put in are saved in OneDrive, which is in your tenant, all that good stuff. But it's the free version, which you'll see there. We've got some really great kind of use cases and prompts that people have found. It's been very, very useful. So it's a good way to get people used to the idea of AI and prompting without needing to go full fat M365 Copilot. So it's a nice kind of bit of pre-work that you could do to start introducing it. You have all of the same kind of things in terms of management, so it adheres to all your conditional access policies, so you can prevent people from accessing Copilot chat on certain devices and all that good stuff. But actually, this is quite handy in terms of getting people used to AI, which helps your adoption. Then when they go to the full Microsoft 365 Copilot, it's less of a learning curve. And you'll see some of the examples in terms of creating FAQs about policies, looking at anti-social behaviour acts, drafting an outline, and responsible AI is used with this as well. So you need to tell people, if you're creating something with Copilot chat, check your sources. Where has it pulled the information? What websites? And it gets people used to putting in use Gov websites only, or look at the UK in the last 6 months, and it gets them used to that mindset. So start with that. There is also a big change that has happened with Copilot Chat, the free version, which happened very suddenly, which was great for everyone to try and learn what it was. You now have Copilot Chat in Word, Excel, and Office apps, as well as the chat. So if I don't have a Copilot license, I can open up Word and I will see Copilot in there. The big difference is between that and the licensed version is the licensed version looks at the graph. The free version does not. So it can only look at the page, so the Word document. So if you have a Word document with an FAQ on there, you open up the Copilot thing and say, can you just summarize the top 3 questions? It will be able to look at that page and respond to it. So it's locked into that. It's not going to look at everything. But you can now start to use it in the Office apps, which was a really big change. So that's something to be aware of. Start with Copilot Chat. It's a good way to start getting people to use it and introducing it. Also, if you're doing a pilot and you get people who are annoyed because you've given licenses to certain people, you can give them this as a supplement to that as well. So we I'll give you an answer, Andrew, in the chats once I've got through the content. So I'll ping you. I do have some thoughts on future functionality and kind of video uploads, audio analysis. We're doing agents for that. So we're creating agents that we're able to upload videos and photos and archives and those types of things. So the next webinar that we have is use cases, and I'm going to demo lots of stuff and lots of high priority use cases that we found. But I did want to just, in terms of readiness, to make sure that you're starting to think about use cases. So you don't need to wait till you've got the licenses. Use cases are a great way to demonstrate the ROI. So when we're looking at, you know, a staff member who's spent this much time on a strategy documentation, before Copilot, they'd spend like 3 days on it. And then with Copilot, they're spending 2 hours. And then you have an immediate kind of piece of value. Also, it's helpful for training because AI can do anything, essentially, which is very difficult for people to comprehend. What can it do? It can do everything. Okay, great. I just wouldn't know where to begin. So having some use cases for people, job aid, one-pagers, those types of things. Here's top 5 things you can do with Copilot. It just helps bridge that gap as well. So start thinking about use cases. And again, we have that pack where it's all use cases that are repeatable in all forces and across industry as well, if I'm honest, of where people are starting to see value out of it and prompts to go along with that. But I would start kind of planning that out now. You can also do some work to identify use cases before even having a license, because all you need to do is speak to your users and say, right, what do you spend your time on that takes you the longest, it's repetitive, and it's admin? Like, what is it that you do that you want to change? And people will have a long list of things that they spend hours and hours on, which you'd be surprised at how much is just repetitive manual data entry or something like that AI can support with. So that's something that I'd recommend you look at ahead of time. Our next webinar will go into that into more detail. The other thing to think about as well is how you're going to capture feedback in your pilot. So if you're doing a pilot for Copilot, make sure that you have a plan on how you're going to collect that feedback from your users. We use different things. A Centre of Excellence, that is a Microsoft team that you create. It's a place for all of your users to ask questions, get information, submit ad hoc use cases as they come across them, or prompts that have worked well. We also use a Centre of Excellence to do like prompt exercises that are quite fun, that just drive adoption, but you need that place for people to communicate and provide that feedback. We also use surveys that are quite handy. And again, we have a commitment from pilot users to say, if you are going to be in this pilot and get all this great technology, you need to commit to completing this survey and to doing this training, and we have that kind of prereqs list. So that's something to think about as well in terms of your communication. We use it to measure things like time savings and well-being impacts. We also do interviews as well, one-on-one interviews. We get a lot of testimonials. And what would you do if Copilot's taken off of you? And the amount of times where people have said, I would cry if you took Copilot off of me is huge. So capturing feedback, think about how you're going to do that. I'd recommend a Centre of Excellence. 5 minutes left. I'm going to quickly zoom through this now, and we'll maybe go into it in a bit more detail in another session. But there's analytics, there's dashboards. You have a dashboard in Viva Insights where you can look at your usage and what people are doing in Copilot and the number of returning users to Copilot. It's not just about using it once a day. It's about using it several times a day and using it more frequently. That's when you get the benefits. So there are dashboards that you can enable that I would do ahead of time so you can then see the trend of hopefully your adoption going up. And if you use CPS, it will. And lastly, the other thing I wanted to just mention is where do you put your licenses if you are going to deploy Copilot? I'm not saying this is the absolute right answer. It's just from our findings of running pilots, this is the highest time savings that we have found. So in terms of the pilots that we've run, which is quite a few of them now, what we found is the non-operational staff have a much larger time saving in an immediate pilot. So I will preface this by saying these are all 3-month pilots. I'm not saying that this is absolutely, just the way it's going to continue. But what we have found from our pilots is things like admin, data analysis, change teams have a really, really big impact. Investigations was really great as well. But that's where we're starting to kind of see the time savings. And we'll share this with you as part of the slides afterwards. As a business case with CPS, what we will do is we will provide you with a map of, based on the use cases and what we've identified, here's where we recommend you putting the rest of your licenses based on what we found. Here's where you'll get the immediate value. Here's how to scale. We work with some forces who are focusing on back office staff to start with, and then as they work through their pilot and see what works, then rolling it out elsewhere. But that's just from the pilots that we've seen. This is where we're seeing massive time savings. If you want immediate impact, then this is where we're finding it. And a last thing before I finish, I got 3 minutes left, my goodness. Don't forget about agents. I've mentioned agents a couple of times. We've talked a lot about M365 Copilot. With your M365 Copilot license, you have access to creating AI agents. There is a process around agents that you'll need to look at. There is a whole thing on governance and security on its own for agents, but we can see massive, massive benefits and ROI from AI agents, and it doesn't have to be complicated. We've done agents where we're helping to classify offences. So the agent will go look at the Crown Prosecution Service information and then pull that back and help classify or recommend, not absolutely definitively say, but recommend based on the evidence that you've submitted. So if I upload my notes, my witness statements, or anything else, it's able to then say, based on this, we think this, and here's the legal information relevant to it as well. So frontline officers trying to classify an offence, then they don't need to go and seek legal advice and do all that stuff. They have all the information provided to them. So there's things like that we're investigating. And different use cases, but I would say as part of a pilot, we'd recommend trying out an agent, building it, trying it out, and that's part of the business case as well. Agents, if you had to use an AI agent, there's a whole session on licensing. So you don't need a license, but you need to have pay-as-you-go turned on in your tenant, and you will be charged per message type. So if you don't have pay-as-you-go turned on and I don't have a Copilot license and someone shares an agent with me, when I click on it, it won't open. I can't access it. So you don't need a full M365 license, but you do need pay-as-you-go turned on. You are charged an Azure consumption and you're charged per message. So that's something to be aware of. I'll share these slides with you because we've got lots of different types of agents. There's out-of-the-box agents that are a good place to start. Researcher, analyst agent, those are amazing. They're so powerful and they're already pre-built and easy to implement. They're already there. So there's things that we'd recommend starting with. We can look at the out-of-the-box ones. Doesn't have to be a custom agent. And finally, to finish off, I've got 1 minute left. I did just want to say we've got a plan on how to get started with Copilot. Hopefully through today, I've kind of shown you our experience in terms of doing it. We've done it a number of times. We've done it with over 80 organizations now across different industries. We know what works well, we know what doesn't, and it's a good place if you're starting out because we have all this knowledge that we can share. We're not just trying it and seeing what happens. We have some expertise now. And so we have a kind of process on how to get started. And I'm conscious we have just landed on time. The last thing I did want to say is Microsoft have announced new funding. So if you don't necessarily need to have lots and lots of M365 Copilot licenses. So I would get in contact with us or a partner of your choice, but we can check if you are eligible for free money from Microsoft to help you with driving adoption of Copilot, even if it's just Copilot chat and creating agents. So please let us know if you want us to check. They've just announced it. It's all fresh. Now is the time to do it because it's all a new pot. And then throughout the year, the pot gets smaller and then you get less chance of getting free money. So I'd have a look at that. The other thing is the next webinars. I know that Mark's sent the link in the chat. Use cases for Copilot and policing. We're going to do some demos with you. And then on the 4th of September, this is where we're going to talk about driving adoption, our tips and tricks. How do you actually get that impact? How do you get people using it? So please scan the QR code or use the link in the chat if you do want to sign up to those webinars. We will be reaching out anyway as a follow-up with the recording, the notes, the slides, the resources that I've mentioned, and then you can let us know if you want us to check in regards of funding to get you started on your journey. But we're 1 minute over now. I'm going to stick on and answer a few questions in the chat, but thank you so much for attending today's webinar. Hopefully it has been useful. I know there's a lot of information. I'm sorry, it's just there's lots to share. Please reach out if you do want to do a deep dive with us. We're absolutely happy to support. And if you're on the journey and starting the journey, it's really exciting. You're going to get some really great feedback from your users and it's going to change their lives and make them happier at work, which is what it's all about. So yeah, really exciting times. Thank you again. And we'll end the webinar there. Thank you very much.